As bars begin to reopen, there's a new way to execute guest service. Training employees will be the key to success and failure, just like pre-COVID, but the only difference now is there is absolutely no room for mistakes. I want to welcome Greg Innocent, Corporate Beverage Director for Parker Restaurant Group out of Chicago, Illinois, and Mia Johansson, Director of Swift over in London, England. Greg fell in love with the restaurant industry during his time in Washington, D.C., where he detoured from his life in politics. With his newly found passion, he worked his way around both front and back of house in restaurants and hotels, and finally found his niche in beverage. Combining his passion for beverage, education, people, and creativity, Greg has cultivated an environment for growth and championing the people who deliver incredible moments for the restaurant guests. Mia began her cocktail career in London, working at prestigious venues. She then spent a couple of years across the pond in New York, creating the bar for Lafayette Grand Cafe with chef Andrew Carmelini. Mia then returned to London, where she and husband Bobby Hiddleston ran a series of pop-ups with the view of opening their own bar. In November 2016, they opened Swift at the former Lab Bar site, and most recently, a second site, Swift Shoreditch, in July 2020. Elaine, let's dive into this session, the training model for new times.
Thank you so much for that great intro. So let's jump right into the new training module for new times. Mia and Greg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks for having us.
I want to jump right into it, and I wanted to start off with you, Greg, and obviously Mia, if you have anything to contribute on this particular question, please do. So Greg, you have multiple restaurants across multiple state lines. Each state in the United States has their own guidelines, as we all know. So how did you choose which guidelines to follow and then emanate across all the restaurants?
Yeah, so as a company, as we try to uniform, our operation, we wanted to go with what appeared to be the strictest of policies and guidelines requested. As we were looking at, the state of Illinois, the state of Tennessee, the state of Florida, want to see which state was asking, the best out of our team to make sure that our team is safe, as well as the guests. And upon, gathering as much information as possible, we decided to go with the state of Illinois, as it, required, of course, the 6 feet social distancing, but, making arrangements within our dining rooms to make sure that, we're as distant as possible. Also allowing a certain number of occupancy. So it was really, what we felt would be the safest for our guests as well as safest for our team.
Can I ask a question?
Mia, what did you guys decide? I mean, you don't have multiple states. You have one set of guidelines that were given. I think they've changed a few times, but...
Yeah, welcome to the UK. Welcome to our own kingdom of rules. Well, you say that London is quite... So I have 2 bars. One is 2 of the most kind of like central London spots. So I've got one in Soho and one in Shoreditch, where there's a lot of pedestrianizing, a lot of kind of movement, and people, even though there's very little tourism right now, is kind of where people like kind of come to generate together. But we have so many different cities having so many different lockdowns across the UK. So kind of like you, Greg, we've been trying to figure out what works for us and take it the most seriously, both for the protection of our staff, but also for the protection of our guests. So whenever the kind of rules were coming in for us, they were flooding in, but with every like 3-4 days. So not only is it expensive to do these adaptations, it's quite confusing, and the trust that you need to kind of gain amongst your staff to kind of sit and be quite steady. We did the same thing. We kind of went a little bit above and beyond to make sure that we were always following guidelines.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. Now, both of you have multiple staff. Greg, I know you have over 1,000 employees. They're in different states. So how did you roll out the training program for each one, for all of them?
Yeah, so, we really organize ourselves to open up each location in its own date. So we were just to make sure that each location was given plenty of support from our corporate team. So, for example, our Nashville team, when we opened that location, we would send out several members from our corporate team to really pass out the information, spread the good word of here's what we're planning to do and here's what we've done as we open up our Chicago locations as well as our Florida location. We were really, even as quarantine was going on, it was important for us to maintain a steady stream of communication with our team members. So we offered actually a weekly town hall, and that town hall really, gave them the insight of what we were working on that later translated to being a space where if there was new information and new practices that we wanted to put in place, we had that space and that forum to do that for our team. So we then started using a online training portal that, we were using paperless training material to sort of reintroduce the team to, even though it was food and drinks that they were probably already familiar with, but now they can sort of refresh themselves after being off for 4 to 5 months. We really tried to keep the message consistent. We wanted to keep it short and consistent. So even on our online portals or our town halls, it was very short and consistent. So the message wasn't a game of telephone of this person said this, but then this person said this, and then this person said this. So what is really the message, and what is it that we're trying to accomplish? So keeping it just simple, short, and consistent, and saying, hey, you know what? We understand that there is a pandemic that's happening. We understand that we all need a source of income and a way of means to establish that, to take care of our personal affairs. So here's what we want to do to, one, like Mia said, gain that trust of our guests, but then gain your trust as employees and the measures that we want to take to be able to keep you safe. And it was a constant, reassuring them and reminding them this is what we're doing.
Would you agree that this is kind of, Greg, sorry, Elaine, if I jump in, would you agree that this has kind of been quite a mental game, especially for the employees, where we are sitting here quite steadily making quite a few, I'm assuming with you, me, doing calculations and looking over financial numbers and planning ahead of the year and constantly coming up with emergency plans. Here it's almost like monthly we're having to come up with a new kind of like how to survive on this island kind of structure. Whilst I speak to so many bars, especially with shortage opening, we were getting a fluctuation of people coming in that wanting to kind of both apply for a job because we had a lot of losses in the UK across all borders, but we had people coming in going like, how are you doing it? Why are you doing it? What is your secret? What's the communication? For me, it was like I felt that we needed to have an interim in the UK, which they're building softly, slowly, but nobody was speaking to each other and everyone was holding the information quite closely because for somehow the integrity of making a loss or making cuts or making redundancies or speaking to your staff was very much like a taboo subject, which made everyone who was employed by a private or a larger company feeling like they were just falling between the cracks. So if you guys were doing a town hall, that I applaud that, because that would have been. We did weekly Zoom meetings and then we did training phone, but I only have 24 people I'm looking after. But like the UK could have definitely done with it, something like that.
And what our team members appreciated about that. We're very candid. With the information that we had, as even for something as minimal as sharing what's happening with certain loans that were being offered to help support small businesses, where we stood and where we stacked with those loans and what that loans would be used for in our place of business. We were very candid with that information and said, hey, just so you can maintain that confidence in us, here's our plan for this. Here's what we need to do. Here's how we're trying to avoid downsizing. Here's how we're trying to avoid making sure that everyone can come back at a full salary pay rate. And even when there was talks to cut pay rates, we were very forthcoming with that information to say, hey, these are the times. Here's what we know, and here's what we plan to do with that, and here's how we plan to recover from that. When, say, things do return to a place where is feasible for everyone. And we're a firm believer that if you can give the team members the information, they're now, they can make a choice to say, hey, either I can find other ways to compensate my loss of income,
and also I think exactly what you're saying, but also how you got to that point, like how you
Sure.
came to the decision, because I think that's what's calming people's minds, that they're feeling going like they didn't just make this decision rashly or without any kind of like facts
Right.
behind it. We made this consciously by calculating this, and this is what we got to it. And if anyone else has any better idea, but this is kind of what we're going to be rolling with until the next kind of news comes on from the government or whatever.
Yeah.
The ever-changing word from the government. So yeah, I think that's so true. With the government constantly changing, it must be really interesting to try to keep your employees up to date, keep them safe, put new protocols into place. So I think one of the most interesting thing, I know, PPE, as you both said, you're both following the strictest guidelines you possibly can to keep your staff safe and for your customers safe as well. Now, Mia, at one of the most award-winning cocktail bars, how did it change how you guys were serving cocktails themselves, like to the guests and presenting them? Because obviously there's a level of expectations. I love rolling at the Swift, sitting at the cocktail bar. That doesn't exist anymore. So, what happens? What are you doing now? And Greg, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, well, the key about Swift, and yeah, we were very lucky to have tails last week, which was so cool. We were upper top 4 for international. That was massive. Very congratulations to our friends in Singapore. But it's one of those things. One of the things we pride ourselves in, and after Googling you, Greg, a lot and hearing about you, I see that you guys do the same thing. We pride ourselves in hospitality, not just behind the bar, but in front of the bar as well. So we went from being a bar where you could be served at the bar and have bar seats. When we no longer can do that, we focus on the floor and communication. So we've been very expressive in the atmosphere in the bar, how it feels in our body language. So when you come into something that is quite COVID stricken, and you can kind of taste the atmospheres, especially like here in London, if something is quite falling apart, you can very much touch the rhythm of the space, so to say. And we've been very much making sure that the guys are having a good time. They're looked after at home. They're looked after for information from us, their training, their communication with each other, everything that to make sure that Swift atmosphere of fantastic hospitality. This is a place where you can come to keep your spirits up and like feel a little bit like taken away from this absolute pandemic we have globally, which is why hospitality exists. And I think that's why Swift has been very successful throughout this kind of, successful, I say, why we've been surviving this pandemic that's going on.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was going to say, the challenge for us is, we pride ourselves on being trying to be a space where, the term escapism really, sets in, where you walk in, you feel like you walked into a different space that doesn't look like your normal outside space. Cleanliness was definitely an issue for us to build that trust with our cleanliness. But as it came to cocktail delivery, we wanted to make sure that the guests noticed that, our staff were wearing gloves, and, even how we were removing glassware from tables, we were still using gloves. We're finding every opportunity to show that our contact, with what they will use to drink a beverage, to consume a beverage, it was going to be very minimum on our end. When we garnish our cocktails, it was with a glove and tweezers. Grabbing a straw, it was glove and tweezers. So it was even down to just a lime for a vodka soda, it was glove and tweezers. So we really want to go overboard with how we wanted to make sure that the guests knew that we were taking every precautionary measure to keep them safe. Because again, their perception is their reality, and we have to do our best to make sure that they perceive us as a safe place to come in and patron.
Yeah, it's kind of, I completely agree with that, Greg. And it's one of those things, safety is such a huge feature. It always has been in all hospitality scene, because we're dealing with alcohol here, and we're dealing with food and something that people take very seriously, especially when there's intoxication involved. so what we've been doing, it kind of the same. What we've been doing is one of those. So we make sure that all the tables are wiped, all the chairs are wiped even before your experience starts. So we wipe them off with washing up liquid that kind of kills the bacteria for us. Leave it for 30 seconds to dry, and then we use our dash, which is kind of the one that takes away the further germs. But we it's more for us that we remove the seats from the bar. We removed our second station, so there's only one bartender working. And whenever there's a round being made, normally we would taste test every single drink that we use, and we would use sustainable straws, metal straws to do that. Back in the days, now we don't. We use paper straws, but they were thrown away directly. It's all done underneath a mask, so there's no extra breathing. Everything is diverse, so it's all the drinks are taken to one spot, and then the person is removing themselves, and then it's picked up by another person on a tray to be taken out to the table. We normally would come in from the side where you would be kind of near the person in their personal space of experience. We no longer do that. We serve from like the front of the table, so you come in, put it down directly in front of them. They get to take it from you instead of there being like a crossover with more like limbs, if you excuse my language. But we were training our new guys to do bartending as well, where they've been in the daytime been able to touching bottles and then cleaning them down before the evening shift starts. So instead of having to train new staff onto doing how we normally would do it, which would be on personal training next to each other, we're having one person sitting in front of the bar watching kind of, I don't know, kind of like how you learn how to fly an airplane. You can't, before you get up in the air, somebody's watching you do everything from the cockpit, from the other side of the window, more or less.
I have not learned how to fly an airplane, but
you know, when
but I can take that with me. yeah, I get it. I got you.
Well, what do you think is the biggest challenge? I was going to say, sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And no, I was going to say, and the other thing I know, and Greg, I know you and I talked about this a bit, was how to train your staff, how to deal with unruly guests, and what are some things you've actually put there. And the other thing is also just helping your guests follow the rules. So what are some things you put in, some management systems you put into place to help them deal with unruly guests? Like, what are the rules for that? And how do you help guests also follow the rules?
Yeah, so, we do have some restaurants in some very interesting markets. And even as we spoke on, different guidelines for different states where, we have the state of Florida where they've fully said, no, everything goes. You can be at 100% capacity. And we're like, oh, no, how do we manage this even from afar? What do we tell our team members, now that people think they could just run up and crowd the bar? The first things first is we build the confidence in our team and tell them that we support you. And just in those words saying, we have your back and everything that you need. If you need to, ask a guest to, because they're being unruly, that they can't patron here, we support you. We'll deal with the Yelp review, whatever review that comes from it, but we want them to be safe at the end of the day. We want our team to feel safe. Now, we definitely want to continue to express that level of hospitality and grace. So we try to set up multiple stations throughout the restaurant with masks and sanitizers. And even as they walk in, we're taking temperatures at the door. The biggest struggle for our guests is using the mask from, after they've walked into the restaurant, when they sit down and before they head to the restroom or to get up and take a picture, and one of our sort of backdrop areas, and we're constantly reminding them and saying, hey, if you don't mind, just put it on your mask as you walk through the restaurant. And even though we're on, being proactive with our hosts and our managers when the guests walk in, we explain to them, as you're walking around the restaurant, any public space, please wear your mask. It still is a challenge. Someone wants to hurry up and get up and run to the restroom. We have stations set up so we can say, okay, hey, before you go any further, here's a mask that we're using a tweezers to pull out and say, here you go. If you can use this on your way to the restroom, it doesn't look as good as the one that you custom made.
You're nice to hear, listen to something that comes from such a large corporate venue to have that much respect, because that's something that we pride ourselves massively in Swift is that we listen to the individual, and it's all about the team first, because without the team we are nothing. We're literally just a very high paying venue that our rent is sky high and doing absolutely nothing. So it's very much getting that confidence in them to speak about it. And it's also one of those things where we're not here to threaten anyone with the information that this is a pandemic. Everyone's so aware of that there is a pandemic. They're saying to them that this is how our guidelines is functioning in our venue, and if you would like to join us, you're more than welcome. And I think exactly the thing that you're doing with the taking the temperature checks at the door, we in the UK that's not been a mandatory thing, but it's kind of like for us, we do the check-in with health and safety from the NHS, so you have to register where you're at to track and trace. But as soon as if you catch your guests with a smile at the door, and they are completely convenient with you with your temperature checks, that they're joining in this kind of experience, and this is, I'm respecting your space of work, then you kind of eliminating those people that do not want to be part of this, more or less making sure that everyone's safe. And you kind of going like, okay, well, if you don't want to do that, then sadly enough, this is the experience we have at Swift. Please move on and maybe join another venue. But you catch them quite early, and you catch more flies with honey, is how we function.
And that's a great analogy, because it does happen at the door, and as it's becoming very common in certain markets, we have markets that are very challenging. It's very challenging for us, where even at the door they'll say, okay, why are you taking my temperature? It's not a mining racer. We're not trying to control your thoughts, but we just want to make sure that even if it doesn't mean anything for you, the person behind you feels comfortable that we're actually doing something to make sure that their dining experience is safe.
And do you either one of you have anything on your websites kind of explaining your policies as well? So if somebody goes on to make a reservation, is there anything that you put up there so they kind of know what to expect?
Go ahead, Mia.
Greg?
Oh, yeah. Well, we do. It's when you make a reservation with us, you get it. You get kind of like, especially with the seatings and how we're very mandatory with timings now. So when you come in for a reservation with us, we've kind of switched them. So normally they would come in like our seatings of 3. Now they're switched in so that we only have a certain amount of people that can walk up and down the venue at the same time. Which means that we only allow one person in the staircase at a time. So everyone's waiting, and how we shift movement throughout the venue and all of that. But that information comes in your booking sheet. So kind of like in your fine print that you can read to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe and distant.
Yeah, for us, we plaster it everywhere. We want to make sure that information is out there as many times as possible. Even when you call in to make a reservation, we let you know about what's happening, how we plan to social distance, timing for turnover. So every guest has 90 minutes to dine with us. Our policies of wearing a mask. So it's plastered everywhere. Even to the comfort of the guests, we have sanitizing stations throughout the restaurant. So if you're walking out of a restroom, or you're walking up to take a picture, there's hand sanitizing stations. So we want that information to be up front and center everywhere, so there's no confusion to how we plan to operate and keep our guests and our team safe.
I think that's the only thing you can do is keep it being transparency, right? Transparency is key.
You can do it. You can do it nicely. Like, we have hand sanitizer on each and every one of our tables. We have like we have signs when you're coming in to the door, in the staircase, in front of the toilets. All of them, we have them nicely framed. I have them with the touches that I like. Everyone can personalize their own kind of experience. I think it is the whole thing. You can never be too blunt about this, but it's just kind of like how you tell the story. It is something very important. Everyone's quite terrified, especially in bar owners' situation. Everyone's in the UK. We're not getting the support that is needed from our government, which means that sadly, a lot of friends of mine, a lot of bars that I've aspired wanted to go to, that I've gone to, they're closing. One of the places that I started at 10 years ago, where I met my husband, Milk and Honey, closed down this weekend, which was alive for 18 years. Institution across the world had to close down because of the situation. So it's kind of like we're trying to keep the spirits high, but making sure that we're keeping safe at the same time.
Absolutely. I was going to say, since we have I'd love to end this session, which has been amazing, with just some words of advice. So, Greg, if you had, a couple of words of advice to give to any restaurateurs out there of how they can best train their staff, or just words of advice of like how to keep up morale, how to keep their staff well trained, what would it be?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that any new habit, any new policy you try to in place, it starts at the top. Even with leadership, as I walk through the doors of our restaurant, I make sure that I let the host stand, take my temperature, and I'm wearing my mask even when I'm walking throughout the restaurant. So when they see that it's important to me, they're willing to maintain and uphold those policies of as difficult as it may be during this tough time. We have to definitely take charge and lead our people through this time. And as best as we can, we try to console them and love them, but support them even through our leadership.
Absolutely. Great words. Mia, any last words of advice?
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is definitely the fact that make sure that you inform your team and you speak with your team constantly, because even though they're putting on a brave face, they're feeling it, maybe not completely the impact of the financial situation, but they're definitely feeling everything that's happening around them, and it's all people's livelihoods that we should not play with at all. I know people are making very, very hard decisions right now, but inform them why and make sure that the conversation is being had, because we're not getting the guidelines from the government in the UK. We can at least have them amongst each other in hospitality. We stand united, I hope, across the world, and making sure that we will make sure this is all going to come back. So karma is going to hit it. So make sure that you're kind to the people around you in hospitality trade at the moment.
I love that.
Absolutely. I think those are some great words of advice for everybody. So I just want to say thank you so much, Greg and Mia, for sharing all your amazing solutions and best practices as we head into these new times. Please be sure to, for those of you watching, please be sure to engage in the chat tab to ask our industry experts any questions right here during Bar Virtual. Until then, stay safe. Bye, everybody.